The Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June 18th, 2024 is now called to order. Andrea, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. It is now 2:04 p.m. Calling the roll, Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne is absent. Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schwan.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Ms. Turner.
Present.
Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Sweeney is absent. Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea, has anyone signed in for public comment?
Yes, we do have public comment. Craig Dorn.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. I'm really pleased to be able to stand before you and
Mr. Dorn, if you could state your name for the record, please.
Sure. And tell you that my name is Craig Dorn, President and CEO of Youth Opportunities Unlimited. And as you know, we do receive generous funding from the council, and I'm here today to urge you to vote affirmative on the opportunity to raise the threshold to 1.5 million for the Board of Control. There's a couple of reasons. First, and maybe most notably, there's always a very rigorous process. I know when we apply for funding, there's a very rigorous RFP process that the procurement office leads. Also, the reason we're interested in promoting this idea is to just make it easier for those in the community. And by the way, while you may or may not even benefit from this, we're speaking just on behalf of the community and many organizations that need to act quickly once the money has been determined where it's going to go. The sooner it can get to the community to ensure the residents of Cuyahoga County are getting whatever services have been procured, the better. And sometimes, as you know, the legal process going directly through council quite naturally has many layers and steps for larger things like $50 million bond issues that you'll be taking up later. So we, again, urge you to consider this. Our personal experience has been at times, it takes a while and it's challenging, and YOU has at times had to go to Huntington Bank and get our line of credit renewed. We're able to do that, but some of the smaller organizations, especially would be in the 1.5 million, probably could not. So again, we urge you to vote affirmatively on that. And thank you very much for your time.
Elaine Gimmel.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Elaine Gimmel, and I'm the Executive Director of Emerald Development and Economic Network, also known as Eden. And I am also here for you today to provide comment on item 2 of the agenda that proposes for the threshold for items that are presented to the Board of Controls to be raised from $500,000 to $1.5 million. Eden receives the majority of our funding through public sources from federal to local level, and we are all partners together in supporting the community. These resources are critical to providing affordable and safe homes for our participants, which we served over 9,100 persons last year and over 5,700 households in 2023. This is more than any other year, and we only see the need increasing. But we couldn't do this important work without Cuyahoga County. Because Eden and many of its nonprofit partners function under very tight margins, funding delays have a negative impact on our operations. And when forced to contend with delays, while at the same time serving an increasing number of households, we face tremendous difficulty in service provision and delivery, meeting payroll, continuing to progress on construction projects, and paying property owners on time. I do recognize that the issue for transactional approval and processing, as well as reimbursement, is not unique to the county. It starts with the federal and state levels of government when they are the source of funding, and their delays result in delays to the county. Every layer has its own procedures to follow before the funds reach the county level, and our homeless system contracts can be quite complex and include multiple funding sources and the need for contract amendments. I also understand and respect processes and the systems of checks and balances, as this is crucial to ensure good stewardship of public dollars. But oftentimes it seems like nonprofit agencies like Eden and many of our partners are forced to extend ourselves to get projects and programs commenced or to continue to operate them. Eden must keep our properties operational, and we also have to continue to pay property owners and utility companies on behalf of our participants in our rental assistance programs, as they will not wait for payment just because a contract and reimbursement is taking a little longer. We often have to use our operating reserve and our line of credit to fund programs until we can be reimbursed. This places a tremendous strain on our organization and results in cash flow issues. In addition, items like interest on our line of credit are not allowable expenses to be paid out of most of our contracts. Any amount of time that can be saved in approving transactions and processing funding, even a few weeks, can really help reduce our financial burden. This new policy change would affect a portion of the transactions we have with Cuyahoga County, as well as many of our partner agencies. This proposed change, to me, shows that the county is working to establish a better mechanism to process transactions timely, minimize cash flow burdens, and reduce risk for providers like Eden. These efforts will strengthen the capacity of homeless system providers like Eden, enable us to be more efficient with the resources we have, and better serve Cuyahoga County citizens. Thank you.
Dave Wondolowski.
Council, Dave Wondolowski, representing Cleveland Building Construction Trades Council. Throughout the last several years, there have been attempts to, by this body and the past executive, to increase the amount of minority contractors, small contractors, help small businesses. This is a step in the right direction. There's no better way to develop small contractors than prompt pay. And time is money. No matter whether you owe the money or whether you're collecting the money, time is money. So in order for these contractors to grow and bid work at the county and be interested in the work at the county, they need to know that they're going to get paid in a reasonable time. There's no small contractor, especially new contractors that exist, that can afford to wait 6 months to get paid. It's got to be a 30-day window or a 45-day window, and you'll see increased bidder participation. I'm convinced of that. But we need that to help grow the workforce, pipeline of workers. It's all relative together. So we support the revisions to 501. We also recognize that the competitive bid process for construction is not touched by that, so we're happy about that. Thank you.
Glenn Shoemate.
Good afternoon, Council, and pleased to be here. I represent Construction Employers Association as well as Contractors Assistance Association, which combined represent about 500 union contractors here in northeastern Ohio.
Mr. Shoemate, if you could state your name for the record, please.
Apologize. Glenn Shoemate, Construction Employers Association, Contractors Assistance. What we like about the 501 bill in particular is the opportunity for efficiency, clarity, and improved implementation. I think with that comes the desire for values being provided in a consistent way, consistent application, as well as equitable opportunities. And so as the previous speaker spoke about, opportunities for improved MBE, FB participation. I think that's important. Certainly the speedier opportunity for contracting, I think is a part of what this legislation also would support, as well as, again, the importance of prompt pay and speedier application, execution of contracts. And so we would hope that this legislation would be consistently applied and considered as a positive, not to usurp any power by council, but also really in alignment with what council is seeking to do as representatives of our county, that there is a efficient and speedier opportunity to engage and support contracts, small businesses, including MBE and FBEs. So thank you for this consideration this afternoon.
Jason Williger.
Mr. President, members of council, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Jason Williger, a fifth-generation resident of Cuyahoga County, a product of the Orange school system, and someone whose passion for the Cleveland Browns is exceeded only by my passion for the truth. Over the last several months, council has been subjected to the most egregious lies about Israel and the war between Israel and Hamas. This war began when Hamas violated the prior ceasefire by massacring over 1,200 innocent civilians in the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. They rampaged through Israel's south, torturing parents in front of their children, children in front of their parents, raping women, and then shooting them in their genitals, cutting off heads of their victims and selling them as trophies in Gaza. Israel launched a defensive war, and now you've been told they're committing genocide in Gaza. That is a lie. But why that particular lie? According to Danielle Pletka, former senior staffer for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, by creating, quote, a moral equivalency between what was done to Jews then and what the Jewish state is now doing in its defensive war against Hamas, the atrocities of the Holocaust are delegitimized. Indeed, the false charge of genocide is what has allowed critics to continue excusing Hamas's terrorism as a justifiable act of resistance. How do we know it is a lie? According to the expert opinion of John Spencer, the former chair of urban warfare studies at West Point, Israel has done more to protect non-combatants than any other military in history. Israel is fighting an enemy who views the deaths of their own people as a tactic for gaining international sympathy. Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, recently had his correspondence exposed by the Wall Street Journal. He speaks callously of Palestinian civilian deaths as necessary sacrifices, and we make the headlines only with blood. That he feels this way is no surprise given how he uses his civilian population to shield his fighters and weapons, turning every hospital in Gaza into a military base in flagrant violation of international law. What the facts demonstrate is the side that is interested in genocide is Hamas. They called for the killing of all Jews. They are joined by those who chant from the river to the sea, a clear call for the annihilation of the world's only Jewish state. Which brings us to what Council has been considering recently, namely to divest from Israel. To do so now would be to side with the monsters of Hamas, to stand with barbarism over humanity. As a proud resident of Cuyahoga County, I cannot imagine our county standing for that. We should stand, as we always have, for freedom, justice, and humanity. Some have said that ending Council's investment in Israel bonds would extricate Council from controversy. Please understand that it will not. We as a community are prepared to see that state law is enforced whatever way we have to do so, in the courts, in this chamber. And to divest now would be to give a victory to Hamas and those who endorse
Thank you,
their
Mr.
Jew
Williger.
hatred.
Your time is up.
Thank you so much for your time and
Very
for your
well,
commitment to our community.
Amy Kaplan.
Good afternoon. I'm Amy Kaplan. I worked with many of you during my 17 years as the Vice President for External Affairs at the Jewish Federation of Cleveland. I retired last year as a professional, but I remain deeply involved in the work of the Federation and the Jewish community, and that's what brings me here today. I want to supplement what Jason said and talk about why this particular resolution, though withdrawn, should it return under another thinly veiled name, or were it to be adopted as general policy of the county, is misguided. This resolution is a clear example of what is called the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which singles out the only Jewish state for special negative treatment, and which is, by definition, anti-Semitic. In addition, what we have learned from years of dealing with this is that this is a financially would have a financially negative effect on the county. The $16 million investment that the county has in Israel bonds is one of its best performing investments, generates about $100,000 a year, which is used to support programs and services that benefit all the residents of this county. In addition, as Jason mentioned, there is state law that defines anti-Semitism, and which this resolution, were it to be adopted even under another name, could very well likely violate. Finally, it would be a huge misstep in terms of the relationships that we hope we can get to in this county, which is that support for the state of Israel and the Jewish community, which contributes so much to this county, remains strong and positive and ongoing. Finally, we believe that were you to adopt a revised resolution or a policy that divests from investment in the state of Israel, that you wouldn't be doing anything to bring about peace in the Middle East. That is something that can happen only between the actors that are involved directly in what is happening right now. This Jewish community supports Israel unequivocally, and yet we also mourn for innocent lives lost in Gaza. And we know that war is hell, and it results in these kinds of tragedies. We want it to end, just as many people want it to end. But this resolution or this policy is not the way to end it. Thank you.
Adam Rosu.
Good afternoon, members of council. My name is Adam Rosen, and I'm an attorney living and working in Cleveland, Ohio, County District 3. When I was a kid, my grandfather marveled at the idea of Israel and what it meant to him as an American Jew. He told me stories about how he was denied entry into social clubs, how he had to start his own law firm because Jews were not welcome. Yet he remained hopeful as things got better, and my upbringing certainly differed from his. It wasn't until I got to college at Ohio State University that I was exposed to my first anti-Semitic behavior. I served on undergraduate student government at Ohio State when a BDS resolution was introduced. That resolution, which ultimately did not pass, achieved nothing but to drive a wedge between Jewish students and the proponents, with many hurtful things said along the way from the student community. Fast forward to today, nearly 20 years later, and County Council is debating the same resolution with the same hurtful public comments being said. Instead, this time, we're less than 9 months from the deadliest attack against Jews since the Holocaust, and American communities are more fractured on this issue than at any point during my life. The BDS agenda is another well-coordinated international effort to attack the Jewish state and to single out Jewish people. This characterizes the Jews as uniquely evil, something that's very different than any other type of demonization that occurs. This has played out multiple times since October 7th here in Cleveland. I've seen signs littered throughout our neighborhood promoting a group that says Allies Against Apartheid, or a bedsheet hung on the bridge above the shoreway with End the Genocide. Just last night, while playing rec softball, a new player showed up in a Free Palestine hat. It was pink. I didn't think much of it until she mentioned the county resolution and the public comment today. When I said that I was coming, she remarked that it must be because I support the IDF who murders babies. Me, a resident of Cuyahoga County. Can you imagine how that made me feel? How the last few months have made me feel? This divisiveness is not paving the road to peace. Your Jewish friends, neighbors, co-workers are not okay. We may all have the courage to talk about it with you here, but a lot of people don't. And we are going through life-changing reevaluations of our worldviews and our friends. Please stand with the Jewish community in this great time of turmoil.
That concludes the public comment portion for today's meeting.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. At this time, the item referred to committee, if you would read it into the record.
Resolution 2024-0203, authorizing the issuance and sale of County of Cuyahoga, Ohio Economic Development Revenue Bonds, Series 2024A, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame expansion project in a principal amount not to exceed $50 million, providing for the pledge of non-tax revenues of the county for the payment of such bonds, authorizing the execution of various documents required in connection with said bond issuance, including an amendment to the agreement related to 2020 county bed tax increase.
All right. Do we have Greg Huth to present? Again, a proposed substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greg Huth with the Law Department. There's a couple of, half a dozen technical issues that we've corrected here with our bond counsel, these kind of nerdy lawyer stuff that we just wanted to be sure we got right in this version of it. Again, these are just all technical things. They don't affect the substance of the issue at all. Just getting some definitions right, things like that.
Okay. All right, any questions?
And is this being supported by the law department as far as these simple changes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then I so moved that the proposed substitute be brought forward.
Properly moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on the proposed substitute? If not, we'll ask for a motion to refer this item to the full council.
No, just
Council President? No, we have a presentation.
Oh, I just want to substitute this, bring forth the substitute, so we could discuss the substitute in the open. Is that?
Okay.
I assume that's correct.
Yes.
So it would call for a vote just on the replacing of the substitute for the original, so we could then discuss the substitute.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a first and a second. You were the first and Councilmember Turner was the second, and we need an overall vote to accept the proposed substitute.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And now we'll have the presentation.
Mike Chambers, Fiscal Officer. Before the presentation, I just want to go over a couple things. Once again, this transaction will not impact our ability to, fund our jail or our courthouse. Once again, this is our non-tax revenue bonds that are being utilized. Bob always indicates we have capacity, we have the ability to pay it back. And in this particular case, we have about $1.7 billion in capacity for these types of bonds, of which, we'll talk about the repayment. In addition, we put certain requirements in the agreement that the Rock Hall has to keep a debt service coverage of 1.5. Generally, the standard's around 1.2 to 1.25, so we're asking for more. We have a liquidity test of 10%. That's basically the ability to pay. And they are right now at all-time balances of cash because Tim and his team has been fundraising for the last few years. In addition, they're clearing enough funds, we believe, on an annual basis, obviously, to pay the debt. But in case there is not enough, we will withhold about $2.3 million in annual bed tax to cover the debt. So the county feels very strongly that while there's always risk, it's very minimal with this deal, and we feel, once again, there's no impact to our other obligations. So at this time, I will have Tim present the project.
And Mr. Chambers, before you leave, this is $50 million, but what I'm hearing you say is this dollar amount is not significant enough to impact our credit rating.
Right, for us to go for our jail, because this is more economic development bonds. They have a different, bucket, for example. We will be using our GO and our sales tax bonds. That's what we need to fund our jail. We'll probably use something like we did for this building, kind of a lease type bonds as well. But these bonds that we're talking about are non-tax bonds, which can be used for the Rock Hall, for economic development.
And
so it's a different bucket is what I'm trying to say.
Different bucket.
Yeah.
And the Rock Hall source of repayment, these are relatively secure. What are they?
Yeah, once again, they're clearing about $5 million a
Sources of
year.
repayment.
They're clearing $5 million a year from their operations. But in addition to that, we give them $2 million a year, about $2.3 million a year in bed tax. They're willing, if they were to miss a payment, they're willing to, in the agreement, we can withhold that from them and use it to pay the debt. I use an example of COVID, were ever to happen again, during that time, obviously a lot of things shut down, we would withhold that money to use to pay the debt. But the likelihood of that happening again, is minimal.
So we are the backstop, but would officially use their own dedicated bed tax dollars to repay.
Correct, yeah.
If necessary.
A lot of people ask us, why do they want to use us? I mean, they could use the port, but, we have, superior credit. Obviously, it would result in a savings for the Rock Hall, which is, one of our institutionals here in Cleveland. And that's probably the primary reason, because we can help them get it done cheaper, probably quicker as well, with our credit.
Any further questions, Councilman?
Yeah, you indicated that if they should miss a payment, we'd have the ability to take the sales tax money that we're sending over to them?
The bed tax.
Or bed tax, excuse me.
Yeah,
Bed- I
it's
mean,
in the
bed tax.
agreement. They're going to sign that agreement, yeah.
The bed tax money that we send over to them, is that annually? If they miss two
Correct.
payments, if they,
Yeah,
God
if they
forbid,
miss
the
it, we have the
pandemic goes
ability-
over for 2 years, we could use it not only just the current year, but the next year.
Right, it's in the agreement. We can withhold the bed tax to pay the debt, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, I just want to repeat what I think Mr. Chambers said, because I had a similar question about the Rock Hall being originally financed by the port, and that was paid off recently. And my question was also going to be, why is the county being asked to support these bonds and not the port? But you're saying because we have a superior credit
Yes.
rating, and it'll be easier to help them get it done.
It'll be easier, they'll get a better price. Credit rating is very important when you're going out to the market. Obviously, the better credit rating, the better you're going to get. The worst, they're considered more risky. We have a very superior credit rating, and obviously, it'll obviously save them some money in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman?
On that point, through the chair to Mr. Chamber, who makes that determination? Is it the Rock Hall Board makes that determination if they want to go with the port or go with us?
Well, they had come to us, I'd say about a year ago, to consider the offer. I did neglect to say that last Thursday, our own Cuyahoga County Community Investment Group, our CIC, approved this financing as well. Last Thursday, they approved it. But they had come to us a year ago, because really that's basically the two options, is the port or us. And with our credit rating being better, obviously they would get a better deal on their issuance and the pricing.
But their board,
Councilmember, do you have your microphone on?
but their board makes that determination.
We ultimately made the decision to do this and bring it before you. for your approval as a public partner with
But
them.
I'm just trying to get a clarity. The Rock Hall Board
Oh,
makes the decision
yeah.
if they're going to come to us or to the port to do these bonds.
Clearly, obviously, Tim can add into that a little bit more, but obviously this has been approved by the board. They've been fundraising for quite some time. I think they have over 130 or so $1 million on hand. This is to help them get it through. Part of the deal that we did talk about, and Tim will probably reiterate this, is his intentions are to pay these down as quick as possible. So, this is a not to exceed, but I think they want to pay them off as soon as they can. And it's up to 50 million, and they may not borrow that much.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman?
Mr. Chairman, I assume that with a better credit rating, also the ability to withhold the bed tax has got to be beneficial to anybody who'd be buying these bonds. Also can see that they've got we have two levels of support in regards to this, whereas the port, would they have had the ability, did they have any source of funding?
I don't think they have the ability.
I don't think they do, do they?
No.
Yeah, so therefore they, when they get up here, we'll ask the question, but I would assume they would also give them a better rating for flowing these bonds.
And we also have it where they're going to put the money into a trust account. I mean, there's a lot of details to this, but I try to keep it high level. But I mean, the ultimate reason they're coming to us is the better deal for them and our relationship with them as a, partner. They are going to offer a couple free days for all county residents. And then certainly on behalf of our hotel with the, every other year Rock Hall induction ceremony, they're going to kind of, hopefully promote our hotel as the, primary hotel. Yeah. So I'll have Tim present.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have we have, Mr. Chambers, one more question from Councilman Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President and Director. If the revenue from the bed tax were not sufficient to cover a shortfall, what would be next in line in terms of the payment method?
Well, right now they're clearing, what we consider about 5 to 6 million a year. So if the debt service is 3, that's item number 1. Item number 2 would then be the bed tax. And once again, the likelihood of that is, they're growing. This, obviously with this expansion, they're looking to bring in more people, more visitors. He'll go over some of his financials with you.
And what would be third after the bed tax?
I don't think there is a third. I think we're looking at the bed tax as a guarantee. That's 2 million. So once again, the 50 million is going to be about 2 to 3 million a year. So that should pretty much cover it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're ready for the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Nice to see you again. My name's Tim Oftermatt. I am the construction project executive for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here in Cleveland. For 5 years before that, I was the chief financial officer there. And before that, as you know, was a local investment banker in town for many years. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share some of the details about our project with you. I think there's a presentation that's going to be put up here shortly, but I'll say a few words before that. As Mr. Chambers noted, the Rock Hall is requesting that the county loan it proceeds of a bond issue that the county will be issuing as secured by its non-tax revenues, an economic development revenue bond. This will help us bring forward our donor agreements that we've been entering into. We've been fortunate enough to generate nearly $150 million in campaign contributions so far for the aggregate of our improvements that we've made to the Rock Hall over the last 8 years or so, and we expect to over the coming years. The work on hand that is encompassed in this particular loan agreement is about $125 million worth of improvements. We do expect there to be some future improvements that are not covered by this loan agreement of about $15.5 million. You may be aware that from this capital campaign, we've completed improvements on our plaza and in our first floor. Our third floor improvements were made in 2008, finished in 2018, which is our new Hall of Fame floor, including the immersive theater that we developed with proceeds of our campaign. And then finally, in 2019, improvements to our second floor were completed, which you may be familiar is an exhibit called The Garage, where people of all ages can pick up real musical instruments and either learn or just play for fun. If the county approves the bond issue, the county will then turn around and loan the proceeds up to $50 million to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. With the issuance of these bonds, we are, and Mr. Chambers explained it well, but one thing I will say, even before you get to the Rock Hall's net income, which has been averaging between $3.5 and $4 million a year in recent years, we expect to pay these bonds off with pledged donor payments. We've had a very successful capital campaign to date, and we expect to continue to raise donor funds. You'll see a little bit later in the presentation, this particular work is funded with private donations, which total over 90% of the total project costs. After the donor payments, then comes our net revenues, which, as Mike discussed, are between 3.5 and 4.5. Sometimes we expect this year for them to reach nearly $5 million. The loan agreement also, the draft loan agreement, should you approve it, requires the Rock Hall to maintain at least minimum balances of 10% of the loan amount, which would be available cash. For example, if the loan is $50 million, we would be required to set aside, and always have it set aside, another $5 million for any shortfalls. We must always maintain a 150% debt service coverage to again assure that we've got sufficient cash. And then last but not least is the bed tax support. Now, what makes that attractive from the county's perspective, from the loaner's perspective, is that the county is sitting on that money before it provides it to the Rock Hall. So it wouldn't have to depend on the entity receiving the loan to somehow pay it back. The county would just apply, instead of giving money to the Rock Hall, would apply the money to pay the bonds. This project is already underway. We have already completed our mass excavation work and our deep foundation auger cast pile work. We've drilled 190 or so auger cast piles going down over 100 feet as we prepare to build the structure. We've had, it is very early, I realize that, but we've been very successful in terms of meeting our very aggressive goals for minority, female, and small business contracting. We are currently, as of the end of May, 50% MBE, 18% FBE, and 29% SBE. far exceeding our goals. We don't expect these numbers to hold because we're early on in the project as we bring more contractors into the mix. We expect those numbers to go down. We do have a county workforce goal of 33% of people working on the job and we do expect to meet that. Our goals, by the way, are 15% MBE, 7% FBE, and 30% small business. We have many partners in the community that we're working with because not only, as we are the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we don't expect to just check the boxes on our inclusion goals. We really want to help grow the construction business in the community. We're partnering with the State Department of Development. The AKA team is our inclusion consultant. Greater Cleveland Partnership, Tri-C, Cleveland Schools, Cleveland Builds, the Cleveland Building Trades. We have a partnership with ACE and CEA, CAA. You heard from both the building trades and CEA and CAA previously. We do have a little bit of a presentation. I want to show you some of the renderings of our project. Just very briefly before we do that, Ohio bond law has a very specific approach toward economic development. The portions of the Ohio Constitution and of state law that we're using really are targeted toward economic impact and jobs. The Rock Hall already generates $225 million worth of economic impact in Cuyahoga County, supports 1,800 jobs in the county. We expect those numbers to grow by about 10% with the expansion. We've had over 14 million visitors since we opened in the mid-90s. 80% of those visitors, roughly, are from outside of Cuyahoga County. So we bring in other people's money. There is no question about that. And we generate over $20 million a year in state and local taxes. Something that we don't, I think, boast about enough is our education programs. We reach, through our digital programs, over 1 million students every year. We attract 10,000 students a year, more than that, for our various education programs. These aren't just field trips. We have PhD level staff on board as Rock Hall employees, and this is STEAM related curriculum that are shared with the students through the lens of popular music. We also house over 400 Head Start kids every year in our Toddler Rock program. One of the reasons that we're expanding is because we have really lousy facilities for our education programs. Our various educational programs for K through 12 kids and even for Tri-C students are often in conference rooms, which are not even all that great as conference rooms, to be honest. So our expansion project will finally provide some adequate facilities for our students. In 2023, we did 170 live music events, over 100 community events, and 14,000 visitors or so are either at free or reduced admission. Every resident of the city of Cleveland is free when they come to the Rock Hall 365 days a year, and we're happy to offer some special days for Cuyahoga County as well over the back of this arrangement. Can we go forward a bit? This is, oh, we can stop, we can stop there. One of the things that we're most proud of in this project is that we're going to develop a 65,000 square foot or so community park available to everybody. As you can see there, it's in between the newly expanded Rock Hall and the Great Lakes Science Center. We have a great partnership with. We're also improving some of their property at the Rock Hall's cost here. You might be aware that property in between the two museums has a 20-foot slope and used to have some old decrepit stairs. Now the project will be fully accessible, less than a 5% grade, so folks of all physical capabilities will be able to get from street side to lakeside easily. There will be some newly developed outdoor rooms, if you will, that will be available for programming, whether it be music programming. Again, our partnership with the Science Center allows for their programs to be utilized there as well. The program for the community park is for native plantings, some rain gardens. It is developed with stormwater management in mind. As you can see there, we have a green roof that we're looking to develop on the expanded facility. There's another picture in here of some amphitheater steps. There you go. On the new inside of the building. This is going to be space where we could have live performances. People can come in and simply enjoy some food, beverage, or just the music that's playing in the facility. This is going to be non-ticketed space. So whether it's nice weather outside or today's weather, anybody can go in the front door and get from street side to lakeside without having to buy a ticket. There's a couple of other views of the development in here. The exterior features black granite, concrete, and stainless steel on the outside. There's a view of a multi-purpose facility that really is the lion's share of the new square footage. This is about 6,000 square feet. During the day, available for classrooms, could be available for banquets, business meetings, etc. In the evening, for live music. I mentioned a moment ago the number of live music events that the Rock Hall hosted last year. Here's a view of what that multi-purpose space would look like during the day when it's utilized for classroom activity. So again, and black granite, stainless steel, concrete. The exterior of this multi-purpose is going to be a stained dark concrete. We're looking forward. There's a look from the community park and the Science Center. That curtain wall that you're looking at right there will also be where we're a member of Lights Out Cleveland. That curtain wall right there will also have bird protection on it. We're very sensitive to being right there on the lakefront. And it'll also have protection because of, in addition to bird-resistant glass, there are a number of different mullions, so hopefully that will help protect as well. I'm happy to open it up for any questions or comments. As I said, we're underway. We're about ready within the next few days to award contracts on the largest group of contracts that that are going to be part of this project. We're very excited about it. We expect the new construction to be done in mid-2026. And we do expect it to be a real attraction. It's already one of the largest tourist attractions in the Midwest, and we expect it to continue to grow as we've been growing since we were pretty much landlocked until we were able to acquire the space between the Rock Hall and the Science Center and use it for expanding our facility. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take whatever questions anybody's got.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any questions? Councilman Strawn.
I don't see anything sketched in here as far as connection with a land bridge potentially. Is there conversations about how and if it fits, and how does that coordinate with anything that the city might be planning?
We've coordinated closely with the city over the last couple of years as they've been looking at lakefront development. The land bridge, in the iterations of the land bridge that have existed so far, are a little bit further west of the Rock Hall, but connect nicely. The land bridge would likely have a ramp that would head toward the east and enter close to our community park, which we like. So we continue to cooperate and coordinate with the city and try and get as much of a connection as possible. We're also working very closely with the Metro Parks on their East 55th to 9th Street project, considering the Rock Hall, our community park, as sort of a trailhead for that. So hopefully, there will be a way to get there from the east, a way to get there from the south, and a way to get there from the west.
And based on the timeline, 2026, that would be another Cleveland induction? Is 2026?
It would be another Cleveland
So
induction.
this would be done in the timing to be completed, I would anticipate, based on what you're saying, early 26, so it'll be done by the time there would be a fall induction?
If we don't have this done in time for the 2026 induction, you will not be seeing me again.
Well, I'm not sure that we want to go to that threat, but we'll just, hopefully it'll get done. Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Councilperson, how are you?
Good. So the city, who owned this property, this land that you are purchasing?
That's a really interesting question, and I won't go into all the details unless you want me to. The lakefront property, and all of the lakefront property, is basically owned in fee by the state of Ohio. Much of the land was underwater at one point. A lot of it is landfill, including the property that the Rock Hall sits on currently and what we're developing. Same thing's true with the Science Center and the stadium, et cetera. The state leases the property to the city of Cleveland, who then leases it to us. We do pay rent. Honestly, it's a small rent that we pay directly to the state of Ohio under what's called a submerged land lease. So it's a bit of a convoluted set of circumstances, but that's, if you were to ask me who owns the land, it would be the state.
And the state will continue to own?
Oh, yes, we are We're working with the state right now actually to clean up some of the convolution, if you will. We have a lease that currently runs through 2042. By the time these bonds are closed, we expect the lease to run through 2075.
Okay, so we're covered.
Yes, we're not going to enter into anything with the county, and we've talked to the county a lot about this until we get these lease matters all settled.
Okay. And how do you see this enhancing revenue? It looks like the experience of the attendees is enhanced, but how would the space, do you envision, bring additional revenue into the Rock?
The expansion allows us to increase the amount of live music events that we have, of corporate rentals. Currently, and we do many corporate rentals, and oftentimes we have to close the museum because there's just not enough space. Hopefully, we'll be able to have corporate rentals without having to close the museum. In addition, and part of this is also some renovation work that we're doing in the existing museum. Featured among that is demolition of the current administrative offices in the Rock Hall. That's about 6,000 or 7,000 square feet of space with 20-foot high ceilings. Very attractive as additional exhibit space. It was originally meant to be the library and archive for the Rock Hall. There was no place for employees, so we, by necessity, had to create administrative offices there. The administrative offices are going to move to the second floor of the new construction, which allows us to open up that space as new exhibit space. If you're focused on the existing museum, our exhibit space will increase by 40%. Something that the Rock Hall has regularly had to turn down in recent years are traveling exhibits, which are revenue generators. And we're hopeful that with the availability of that space, we'll be able to stage, house traveling exhibits, or expand our own exhibit space. Growth in the museum allows us to grow our revenue. Before the pandemic, we were closing in on almost 600,000 annual attendees. We haven't caught up to that yet. We're around 500,000. We're expecting about 500,000 this year. We expect that to grow by a couple 100,000 with the completion of the expansion and renovation.
Thank you.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. President, to Mr. Ostermatt, on your slide, it said that the MBE goal was 15% of eligible construction activities. How is eligible construction activities defined?
To the councilperson, through the chair, that's a very good question. As this group has been involved in many construction projects, there are certain areas of construction that tend to be exempted from the MBE, FBE test. Things like, in the sports realm, things like scoreboards in stadiums where there's a particular technology, particular installation, particular product that is required, and it may be difficult to meet the MBE, FBE, or SBE goals with that. the lion's share of our project, which is the far and away bricks and mortar, if you will, and not specialized equipment. But we wanted to be completely accurate there and make it clear that there may be some digital signage that would be carved out of our MBE, FBE tests. It is our expectation that we exceed by quite a bit our particular goals for MBE, FBE, and SBE work, in addition to implementing apprenticeship and training programs.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Oftermatt, on that follow-up on that point, when we did the disparity study, we calculated disparity based on where African Americans were actually eligible or had existing industry. For example, if the elevator industry is a major industry that there is not a significant African American population, so there's no racial disparity if there are 0 African American companies on the elevator. That's already built into what we've done at the county and the goals and things we set forward and the action items that everyone is held accountable to. When you use that term eligible for MBE, I see it's also on SBE as well. It's not on FBE. I have to think my way through what you're saying there. And who is actually on your side making this determination around what is eligible and what's not?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me answer that this way. In the loan agreement, if you were to approve it, in the loan agreement between the Rock Hall and the county, the Rock Hall is required to at least meet the county's standards for inclusivity, and we expect to do that and then some. So at the very least, we'll have to meet the requirements that the county currently has.
Okay, we'll have to have follow-up conversation on that.
And I'm happy to, whether it's in front of this body or with any member individually or collectively, to continue to update the council or the committee on how we're doing with these goals. This is really important to the Rock Hall, and I can't minimize that. It's these inclusivity standards are really important to us.
All right. Any further questions? Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Oftermatt. Of all of the attendees that you have, what percentage would you have are at no cost? I heard you say Cleveland people and sometimes Cuyahoga County people, but do you have a percentage?
About 14% of our attendees are either at no cost or discounted.
Okay, thank you.
Further, Councilwoman?
Just on that point, through the chair to Mr. Oftermatt, but MLK Day is free for everybody.
Everybody.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, did I see a hand? Not, we will move forward. Will we entertain a motion to, we will entertain a motion to refer this item to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2024-0005, amending Chapter 501 of the Cuyahoga County Code.
Let me just take a moment right now and say that as we begin this conversation on Chapter 501, this is one where we're going to need time. This is certainly not something we're voting on today. We want to have an introductory conversation and questions and get the ball rolling on this particular ordinance item. We will again look to have a stop around 3:30 so that we might budget our time for other items as well. So at this time, who do we have to speak to this matter? Is that Paul Porter?
Good afternoon, Council. Katie Gallagher from the Executive Office. Early last year, the administration gathered several fiscal staff and discussed areas of improvement for operations and customer service for our residents and vendors. These discussions included a multitude of items, including training programs for current and future staff on our software and fiscal policies, updating outdated processes and procedures where necessary, cleaning up audit issues like timely bank reconciliations, making the RFP and RFB process easier to navigate, especially for smaller businesses, streamlining the payment process to vendors where we can, like ACH payments, and finally updating chapters 5 and 7 of the county code where necessary. I know that you guys tend to hear about all the areas where the county has made errors, but in my experience, like in the case of duplicate payments or decertification, recertification issue that happened last year, these issues tend to stem back from lack of training of employees properly. When we implemented the ERP system, we cut the training budget, so we need to learn from those mistakes. And when we go to re-upgrade that ERP, make sure that training is part of this. Sometimes we see inconsistencies from various fiscal units because we have inconsistent onboarding and training. Again, the Department of Purchasing has had several training sessions over the last year to try to improve outcomes. I say all this to point out that we realize this code change is not a silver bullet to improve procurement, but only one factor to many areas the many fiscal staff are working to improve. Before we get onto the substance, I just want to thank all the employees, the council staff, and the vendors who helped provide feedback for where we are today in these 501 changes. And lastly, I want to have a special thanks to our Director of Purchasing, Paul Porter, and our law department who did the heavy lifting. Paul.
Thanks, Katie. Council President, council members, thanks for the opportunity to speak on this legislation this afternoon. As Katie mentioned, this was a true team effort. We solicited feedback not just from staff involved in purchasing and contracting in various departments throughout the county, but from vendors throughout the community as well. And we think we've put together a good package of recommendations that balance the need for efficiency and oversight. We're proposing revisions to approval thresholds governing competitive bidding, and looking at how can we shorten the overall timeline for the solicitation and award process to get contracts and purchase orders in place, and ultimately, as an indirect benefit, hopefully start projects sooner and get vendors paid on a more timely basis. Last fall, some of you may recall an article on cleveland.com about why vendors don't want to do business with the county, and that is something that I really took to heart as we were undergoing this kind of review process of our current policies and procedures, trying to seek out areas where we can improve what we're doing and build upon things that we already do well to make Cuyahoga County a place that vendors want to do business with. Some of the changes that we're recommending here are simple. Things like standardizing the use of transaction instead of having multiple bullet points in the code, whether it's a purchase, a sale, a contract, or a purchase order. Some of them appear more complex, especially from a perspective of reading it in the code, but those complex changes, like our overhaul to the competitive solicitation process, are more, trying to get the code in line with our current business processes, where we're just as likely to use a request for proposals as we are a request for bids, depending on the type of good or service we're procuring. We're recommending threshold increases, the first increases since 2019 for both the solicitation process and the approval process. We'd like to raise the threshold for informal bidding, which currently sits at $5,000 to $49,999, to anything between $25,000 and $250,000. It's important to note that our informal competitive solicitation processes are generally more rigorous than processes used by some of our peers, including the fact that if we get fewer than 3 responses, like 3 proposals or 3 bids to an informal solicitation, we require departments to go back for a second effort and solicit more bids. Some of our peers across the state and across the nation don't do that. They just make an award to whoever responded to the solicitation. This is an example of us trying to make things easier for vendors and for the departments that are doing the solicitation, because it's generally easier to respond to informal solicitations than it is to respond to, a thick RFP or RFB that we issue as a formal solicitation. The Ohio legislature voted last year to increase the minimum threshold statewide to $75,000. We're a charter county, so we don't necessarily have to follow exactly what Ohio prescribes, but I'm interested to note that Ohio gave themselves on a state level a $250,000 threshold for competitive bidding for construction. I realize that there are projects that are a lot larger that the state does versus what we do, but we also undertake large multi-million-dollar construction projects, and we're looking at this as a chance to align our standards with what Ohio is giving themselves permission to do. We looked at what other jurisdictions have their thresholds set at, not just within the state of Ohio, but looking at other comparable jurisdictions across the nation to come up with recommendations that we feel, again, are a balance of efficiency and oversight. Another example I'll look at is the threshold for approval by council versus Board of Control. Currently, Board of Control has the authority to approve any item up to $500,000. We're recommending a change in that threshold, which has been fixed since 2012. That threshold was established shortly after the new form of government went into place, and it has not been adjusted. We're recommending raising that threshold to 1.5 million. Again, not to reduce council's oversight or say in the process. Recall that council does have 3 seats on the Board of Control, but this is just to speed up the process of purchasing items between that 500,000 and 1.5 million threshold. Examples of purchases that are between those dollar amounts in 2023 that had to come to council for approval, going through multiple readings and a committee hearing, include the purchase of 7 pickup trucks, alcohol bracelet monitoring services, service, inspection, and installation on fire and smoke dampers, and a variety of construction and engineering service contracts. I would ask you, because council approval typically takes several weeks longer than Board of Control approval does, is there a need for that level of oversight on, a purchase of 7 pickup trucks, for instance? In terms of a cost-benefit analysis, is it worth delaying that purchase to have it go to a committee hearing, or would we be better off sending it to Board of Control, where council still has a chance to weigh in and ask questions, but ultimately we can get that vehicle purchased more efficiently? That's an example that I'll point to, because there have been times when we've gotten bids from dealerships for vehicles in particular. It's taken a while to get the approval, and they're like, oh, Ford closed the ordering portal. We're going to have to charge you more because it took you too long to get the order in. That costs taxpayers more, and it's an example of our inefficiency in our current processes. We're also recommending on the lower end, increasing the threshold for what appears on the Board of Control to $25,000. Right now, items $5,000 and above have to go on a Board of Control agenda. That's much lower than a majority of our peers, and it's lower than what some other municipalities within Cuyahoga County have the ability to purchase without going to their city council or their city Board of Control. Examples I would use are Hamilton County, our neighbors to the south, allow purchases up to $100,000 without a vote by anybody. Summit County allows $25,000 purchases without any vote, and Montgomery County allows purchases up to $50,000 without a vote. It's important to note that most counties in Ohio operate under the county commissioner model, and their county commission typically meets once and sometimes twice a week. So getting purchases approved by county commissioners is inherently more efficient than our process for purchases that have to go to county council. It looks a lot more like our Board of Control, which meets on a weekly basis, versus having something go to county council, which, as the charter mandates, requires an introduction, a referral to committee, and multiple readings, unless council takes a vote to dispense with some of those additional readings. So that means that even if, there's a transaction that has to be approved by a Board of Commissioners, it can generally happen more quickly than getting approval from county council. But again, we're out of step with our peers that allow purchases to happen at lower dollar amounts before any sort of, board vote or board action. These changes may seem large, but we made threshold changes in 2019, and I know there was a lot of discussion at that time about, is this going to reduce oversight? Are there going to be potential negatives? And from a business perspective, having been on the department side when those changes are made and now leading the purchasing department today, we haven't seen, a large amount of negatives, I suppose, with those thresholds being changed. Purchases under $1,000 currently can be made by departments. Purchases between $1,000 and $5,000 have to be issued as purchase orders, and we do a list monthly of those purchases. And there are times when that's published with the Board of Control agenda that we get questions from council members about purchases, and the departments are accountable to answer those questions. Beyond the changes recommended here, as Katie mentioned, we're looking at other stuff. I realize that this isn't going to fix everything, so we're working with departments to make sure their, proposal award process and proposal review and award process is handled more efficiently. We know that there are certain things that by state law have to be done in a more efficient manner, otherwise vendors can charge us more. Construction is an example of that. So whatever we can do, and I'm happy to say that council has been our partner in things like speeding up the resolution signature process so that we can turn around once those resolutions are digitally signed and get the contracts executed and get a construction project started or get clients referred to a health and human services vendor. You saw vendors testify during public comment about how these changes could be beneficial to not just their organization, but other organizations like theirs. I felt very good to have Craig Dorn from YOU here speaking in a capacity that, as these recommendations exist, a lot of their contracts are higher than that 1.5 million, so it wouldn't necessarily be a direct benefit to his agency, but he sees the benefit to smaller agencies out there. Think of it this way: if you owned a business and Lake County or Lorain County could get a contract approved in half the time or less than what Cuyahoga County could get it approved, all things being equal, who would you rather do business with? I do have Mary Beth Vaughn from the Department of Public Safety and Justice Services here. I don't know if she'd like to make some remarks about, from a department perspective, how these recommended changes would help. And I look forward to continuing this discussion. I'll turn it over to Mary Beth.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Beth Vaughn with the Department of Public Safety and Justice Services, and I'd like to thank you for considering updates to the procurement rules. There are two potential areas that are of special importance to our operations, and those are increasing the competitive bid threshold from $50,000 and also increasing the department approval of purchase orders from $5,000. As you may be aware, in addition to normal operations, Public Safety and Justice Services uses grant dollars to purchase goods and services for local public safety forces. Over time, the price for these items have moved beyond the competitive bid threshold. Unfortunately, the formal bidding requirements doubles the amount of time it takes us to complete these purchases, and it also requires these public safety forces whom we're making these purchases for to come in to participate in pre-proposal conferences. In addition, the grants that we use to pay for these products require that we do paid legal notices anytime we do a formal competitive bid. So that adds $1,000 to $2,000 for each of these projects. If we did not have to go out to competitive bid, then we could use that money to purchase additional equipment and supplies. Also, the current $50,000 threshold, it results in us having to really limit the amount of projects that we can do when we have reallocated grant dollars because of the amount of time it takes to complete the formal process. The other potential change that would benefit us is increasing the department threshold for purchase orders from $5,000. This would help us because it helps us get the equipment more quickly to the safety forces. It also allows us to enter into those agreements with the vendors more quickly. Oftentimes, when we have a purchase that's over $5,000, we're running into one of two scenarios. The vendor is sitting on their inventory, waiting for us to get the approval so that they can actually fill the order as soon as we place the order. More often than not, though, what's happening is they've given us a quote, we're going through our approval process, they've sold that item to somebody else, and now we're sitting there having to wait for them to replenish their stock in order to deliver this good or this particular item that we've ordered. We don't encounter these issues when we're making a purchase for less than $5,000. In closing, because so much of the equipment that we do purchase is highly specialized with a small market of vendors, the ability to procure these items through an expanded informal bid process will allow us to reduce the solicitation period for quotes. It'll allow us to respond more quickly to the vendors and respond more quickly to these project owners, our local safety forces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. And just one example before I ask if you guys have any questions of how much longer it takes to get something approved by county council versus something approved on the Board of Control. The items that are to be introduced to council at tonight's meeting, so the June 18th meeting, had to be in and approved by the Department of Purchasing by Thursday, May 30th at noon. So these departments that got these items in, particularly if you're looking at like a master agreement that has multiple vendors, had to be working with vendors, getting insurance certificates, getting CEOs to sign off on contracts, getting all of the required documents together, then send it to my team, have someone review those documents to make sure they were accurate, and then wait multiple weeks for it to appear on an agenda, and then it has to be introduced, go to committee, have a second reading, and potentially have a third reading according to the language in the county's charter. These are vendors that are out there ready and willing to provide services, and they're having to wait weeks upon weeks for us to get the contracts or purchase orders approved. And then after you approve items that are maybe up for third reading or second reading suspension at tonight's meeting, we have to wait for the approved resolution to get executed. Then we have to send the contract to get executed. Then we have to send it to the vendor. So just because, council votes yes or Board of Control votes yes, there are still steps that take, multiple days and up to a week later. So this is not a process where the county can say, we want to contract with a vendor and it gets done in a week. In some counties where the commissioners meet weekly or multiple times a week, purchases can get made that quickly. I'm not saying we're going to get exactly there. One thing I'll note is when we looked at a peer county that has an executive and a council setup akin to ours, Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, their county executive is empowered to execute any and all contracts and make any and all purchases without seeking legislative authority. And their county council simply gets a report on a monthly basis of the purchases made by the county executive. That's not the posture that our executives team was willing to take. I was like, guys, we can get things done a lot more quickly. We're not looking at any recommendations anywhere close to that. Again, our team reviews purchases from across the county. That includes the contracts and grants that have come through as council designated ARPA spending. We're looking at this as a change that benefits the county as a whole. This isn't just my idea. It's not the executive's idea. This is a collaborative approach where we've gotten feedback from multiple departments, and we asked for your consideration to make it easier to do business with the county. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Director Porter, and to all those who have presented. Director Porter, I've been on this council for what, it's been 12, 14 years now? 13 years.
13.
A long time. A long time is probably the best way to put it. And I've gotten the calls from vendors when I was chair of HHS, and Councilman Conwell gets them. When I was chair of Public Works, I've gotten those calls. You know, I haven't gotten my check. I got to meet payroll. And every time and a good number of those calls, I didn't have to say, well, I'm still waiting on 3 more readings, or I'm still waiting on. There is a side to this process, the importance of prompt pay, and all that we heard from Dave Wondolowski and Glenn Shoemate, and all that are impacted. It has not always been on the legislative branch's side. There is an element, now, we have the public forum, and everyone sees us here, but the administration has a side as well. As you said, this won't be a silver bullet. If we passed it tonight, it would not be the silver bullet and the solution. We need to have a robust conversation, and I'm looking forward to that starting today, but a conversation that is not simply limited to what council needs to do, but an open conversation around what the administration needs to do, so that we present more than just that's something to be called a silver bullet. We would like to have a genuine solution to prompt pay, things that have been a 14-year issue that have gone across not this administration only, but we go back across 3 administrations where this problem has been real. It is there, but it is not simply what has been laid before us today. Whatever we do with it will not be the answer, and it will not be a silver bullet. If we want to get a silver bullet, it's going to take a conversation, an open conversation around what the administration can do as well. So we need to have that conversation in tandem so that we can give to the community what they are rightfully asking for, which is a solution to prompt pay, because we get the phone calls. We get those calls, okay? And it's always, well, council, you know, we're council, what are you gonna do about it? Well, here's our big chance.
Thank you.
Here's our big chance. So we're going to almost reset the narrative around how this conversation goes. Because I'll say this, oversight is important. And oversight is not simply slowing this process down. So I'm going to be very slow in my desire to want to give up oversight, certainly without seeing the bigger picture of what all of us need to do to give the community what they so richly deserve. So I'm going to take a moment's pause there and let each of my colleagues weigh in. I saw Sonny's hand first earlier, and we'll work our way down.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. You echoed my exact thoughts on this. Is that everything that I heard had to do with prompt pay, not with the legislative oversight. So that's number one. The processes that I heard were administrative, not council. And I don't want anybody to forget that the peer counties and what we're being compared to have, these are much higher levels that we've been presented with. And lastly, our county came out of a corruption scandal, and we worked very hard to make sure we have oversight. And we're not, in my opinion, ready to just give this to the administration when what I see is that the prompt pay issue has everything to do with the administration's own internal deadlines and policies that they have in place. So those are my initial comments and observations that I agree with you, Council President, about really where the problem lies, in my opinion.
And I think our opportunity to comment will be all we can do before 3:30, but I think that'll be a good starting place because there's a lot here, and we do want to give you an honest assessment of what you brought before us. So that means that everyone on this council needs to be able to digest everything that you've just shared with us and what's before us. So let's continue. Councilman Gallagher.
Thanks, Paul. I've been here 15 years, so
Council President must be my junior, I don't, or going into our 15th year, I should say. But anyhow, yeah, like Sonny said, we're here for a reason. And we're not here because things were good in Cuyahoga County. We're here because there was a horrendous scandal in this county, and it got cleaned out and we got seated. And we fought real hard with the administration at the time, I should say, worked real hard with the administration at that time to make sure that we buffered everything that we did. That's more work for us. And everybody thought we were crazy. And we're like, no, this is going to be on us. Although, if you remember, Mr. Mowry was here. I remember when he came in, probably no disrespect to the IT people now, but without question, the best IT guy we had. And he had on one room on the 3rd floor, I believe it was, the old administration building, computer paper went all the way around the room. And I said, what's that? And he said, that's what it takes in Cuyahoga County to buy a pencil. And we're still there. So what you're talking about is true. We haven't dealt with it sufficiently. This is a good first step. But I am very leery about raising the amounts. You're going to have to really open my eyes on that. But you're right. We have to do something to make it better. In my committee, it's never the legislative problem. It's always people coming in front of us with contracts that have been sitting for a year. That's not legislative. And I always ask the question, why so long? Well, it was their in-house problem, battle, whatever, with the vendors. And I will say, I've never been to a meeting such as this where sitting vendors are up here that aren't seemingly impacted by what we're talking about, are suggesting we should move forward on this. So I'd be very careful on the legislative side. Sometimes it is our fault, no question about it, but those are rare. Those are rare. And in my committee, it's always the people coming that had an in-house problem. And we've always said, can we help you with that? Is there something that on our side we could do to help you? We'd be more than happy to do it. So I think we're starting the conversation that needs to be had and should have been had 14 years ago when we were trying to figure out why a pencil took a whole room of paper to buy. And so I think we're, as the president said, in a slow, forward, progressive movement, I think we'll get to a solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilman?
Yeah, I'll state publicly, I'm not against changing the dollar amounts, because I was an advocate for $1 million at the very beginning of this council 14 years ago. So we reduced it down to 500,000. I accepted that. Obviously, inflation, the Rule of 78 says that would have doubled once every 7.5 years. So here we are. I think my number says we're in our 14th year as far as the new government out there. But as my colleagues are all saying, I'd love for you to come back to this body and tell us how many days till that vendor got the ability to deliver the product that it was from the time we gave the 3rd reading or 2nd reading under suspension. Come back and tell us that, because we've all heard the same thing. We can't get this thing released. It can't get out of the executive branch. It can't. And some of these things, these renewals of contracts, coming back to us on service agreements. And we have some service agreements that I can remember when I was on Public Works. They were 5-6 months afterwards, and we have to go back and back. So why are we backdating this thing? And it looks like we're the ones on the legislative side that somehow we had oopsed, and it never even got to our desk out there. So I think that in order to have a fair and honest conversation, we need to know when it left here on 2nd reading suspension. We slapped the gavel. It's now over in the executive's office to sign that thing. We've heard sometimes that some of those signatures take a long time before they ever get signed into the legislation gets signed. So and I'm not trying to find fault with it as much as let's identify, as my colleague, Mr. Gallagher, if the intent is to compress the process, let's all figure out what can we do to compress the process. The dollar amount doesn't really compress the process. From that standpoint, other than perhaps if it goes to the Board of Control. That's the only way that compresses the process. And if the number is 1.5 million, then 1.5 point a dollar doesn't get through the process. So I really believe that it needs to have process control first, and then you come back and say, okay, if under those circumstances, these are the ones that really got hung up, because I think you'll be shocked at how many times things never even got to us that were under renewal and refreshments under contracts. Yeah, because I know we're all shocked. We hear it all the time when we're up here at this asking for approval.
Can I get 1 minute?
I want my colleagues first to be able to weigh in, because we're going to end in the next 5 minutes. So,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question to Paul. Does this threshold increases impact all county departments?
Yes, Councilwoman Conwell, these threshold increases would be countywide. It would impact anything that currently comes to council or the Board of Control. It wouldn't necessarily impact, folks at independent agencies like the Board of DD, Board of Elections. Some of the BOE items still come here, but it would be any contracts and purchases that go to either Board of Control or County Council as it stands now. These recommendations are for uniform changes.
Okay, well, I have to agree with your statement earlier, Paul. The inefficiencies can be avoided if the departments on the administration side plan correctly. What is needed in their departments, putting out RFPs sooner. Council has always been gracious in every committee to do second reading suspension. I don't think I've ever had a chance to ever do a third reading in HHS because there's always a problem on you guys' end. So I have to agree with my colleagues and as well as with Councilman Schron. I mean, every administration always comes to us to fix a problem. And each administration has never taken steps to fix their issues first. So meet us in the middle and start fixing your issues. Because, we've had many dialogues and had the calls that Councilman Jones has had, still have them. They've gotten better. I haven't had any calls in a while. So we're improving somewhere. So maybe that'll be a committee where you can come to HHS and share, because I haven't had any calls from vendors lately. So something since our meeting must have improved in that department. The new issues, I think, are coming from Public Works. Fiscal are the ones that are having the issues. So look to your employees first, and thank you.
any other council members that want to weigh in? Councilman Miller.
So, Mr. Chairman, Director Porter, a couple of things. First, I would second what my colleagues have said in the sense that I've recently been dealing with multiple things where we passed legislation and then it's taken a very long time to get the contracts executed. So that's a concern. The second thing that I would share that's different from what others have said so far is that I'm not sure dollar amount is always the best indicator. I know of cases where we've purchased more than $500,000 in postage stamps, and there's no other place you can buy them, and it's very routine. But then there's other contracts that might be only 25 or 50,000, but they're either new programs or something we've never done before, or create policy issues where we'd want the council to take a look at them. So maybe we can ask the question of how do we identify some of these very routine items and carve them out? So I just put that out there for thinking. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. All right. And to echo that, dollar amounts aren't always the indicator. In fact, that is where, in part, our oversight lies, and that is where we are being impacted. So we're going to move slowly on that thought. So I think we're going to end it here. Paul, I'll let you have the final word, and then we'll end this conversation.
Certainly. Thank you, Council President. And thanks, everybody, for your valuable feedback. Councilwoman Conwell, I'm glad to hear you say the calls have been fewer. There were probably certain departments that I didn't say, hey, come talk in support of this, because they don't always like hearing from me. I work for the entire county. I don't represent just the executive. We process transactions from county council. There are times when we disapprove county council's transactions and say, you're missing this, you're missing that. We try and hold departments accountable as much as possible. And I'm more than happy, Councilman Schron, to provide data on our turnaround times. I would ask if council members have gotten calls about particular contracts or from particular vendors, especially if it's within the past 3 months, please let me know. When I moved into this role, I had a special familiarity with the implementation of the ERP system. I realize that that's often, or more was in the past, often used as an excuse for not being able to pay vendors. At this point, those cases should be few and far between. We figured out, if you're getting an over budget error and there's not really an error, here's a workaround for that. Our team works collaboratively with the IT team to make sure that if there's a technical holdup on billing, for instance, that's not a problem. I'm also more than willing to take a collaborative approach, answer any questions that you would like, provide data that might make this an easier discussion for you. And I like Councilman Miller's suggestion that it's not always about dollar amounts. I'm willing to bet that there might be a $3 to $5 million transaction that's a renewal of a standard contract that we have, that if we could get buy-in from council that, hey, this doesn't have to go to the whole council, let's send it to Board of Control. Think about if you award an RFP that has multiple option years on it. If you guys have already reviewed the award and approved that through council, why would an option year have to come back to the full council for approval unless there are substantive changes? These are discussions I'm more than willing to have. And again, if you have, specific cases that you'd like me to look at, none of this is about absolving staff members that are involved in purchasing, whether it's from my department or whether it's from the departments that we support, from responsibility. And if you guys are looking for signs of partnership from the executive side, I'm more than happy to provide those. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to at least open the conversation on this, and I look forward to seeing where it goes.
All right, thank you, Director Porter. Right. At this time, we'll move on to our executive session. All meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside of the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a collective bargaining matter and pending or imminent court action. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not specifically needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent Committee Room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session has ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a collective bargaining matter and pending or imminent court action?
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Will the clerk call the roll on the motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Byrne is absent. Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Council President,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sweeney is absent. Council President,
Yes.
you have, the motion carries.
All right. We are, the ayes have it. We'll adjourn for executive session. council meeting, and we are now back on the record. Is there any miscellaneous business? Not, if nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene at 5 p.m. sharp.